Hi, everybody. I'm really excited about this, being able to talk to Dody Dorn and bring her wisdom to you. I'm proud to share the stage with a woman whose post-credits go back to 1979. She has worked with some of the most celebrated directors of our time, Ridley Scott, Christopher Nolan, Baz Luhrmann, David Ayers. She's edited films. She's also was the supervising sound editor on The Abyss for James Cameron. Her credits include Matchstick Men, Australia, Fury, Kingdom of Heaven, End of the Watch, and the recently released Power Rangers movie, but she's probably best known for her Best Editing Oscar nomination for Memento. Ladies and gentlemen, Dody Dorn. Which side?
Thanks. Oh, how about this side?
Okay. Women always know
halfway through, we'll switch.
I like that idea. One of the things that I was so interested in when we talked a little bit earlier was the idea of the emotion and how important the emotion is on some of these things. And Fury was one of those that we just watched go by. And I was struck when I watched Fury with that scene where, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he was forced to shoot the Nazi.
Norman.
Norman.
Yeah.
And
Logan Lerman.
That was so difficult to watch.
True, yeah, it was very difficult to watch the dailies for that, actually. And that's one of the scenes that I think it barely changed from my first cut till the finished film. So I found the most penetrating, kind of intense emotional moments that felt most authentic to me, and then built the scene around it.
Mm-hmm. And so when you found those moments, did you find that you couldn't edit the scene from beginning to end, but needed to start and kind of start from where those moments were and build out in both directions?
Right. I watched the dailies and, like I like to do, let the scene sort of soak in, and the anchors, which were the sort of the penetrating moment where he pulls the trigger, and there were some unique takes, and I took those and then built out.
Mm-hmm. When you kind of have to do that because, right, the other takes would have maybe a different temperature to them, or the continuity, or what was the reason that scene never really changed after the first edit?
I think that those moments were so unique that none of the other takes had what those were, and then there could be some subtle differences on the edges, but it was basically that structure.
Okay.
Does that make
sense?
Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me. I love that. I have a little surprise for you, and I want to ask them to roll videotape 4, please. Oh. So if you look right down there on the where they see us, it's kind of weird looking at us, but if they would roll videotape 4. Check this out.
Hi Dody, it's Cheryl coming to you from sunny Sydney, where you cut the film Australia and I was your assistant. I learned so much from you on that film, and in the years since, you've been a really great mentor and role model for me. You've worked with a lot of directors over your career, from Christopher Nolan to Ridley Scott to Baz Luhrmann. Do you find that the different directors have different approaches to the way that they want to edit the film? And does that mean that you have to adapt the way that you do your job?
Fantastic. Yes. Yes, yes, and yes. I think that really everything has to be adapted based on what the material is, who the actors are, who the director is, what the style of the film is, what the genre of the film is. All of that is playing into how the editing is going to be done. Mm-hmm. Is it invisible editing? Is it very visible? And is it over the whole film, or is it even just for sort of a part of the film? So you can say that generally you want the editing to be seamless and invisible and not draw attention to itself. But there might be one sequence where you want it to sort of jump out and be different. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think you mentioned all that jazz because that scene where the heart attack happens, all of the sound drops out and the pencil breaking has its sharp sound, and that's very aggressive, kind of drawing your attention to the editing and the sound design. But the rest of the film is much more in the invisible vernacular.
Okay. You led right into this, so this is going to be very unusual.
Okay.
We're going to roll video clip 1 again. It's strange that you should mention all that jazz because we have this clip.
Okay.
Videotape 1 or 2. I'm sorry, 2. 2.
Hi, Dody. This is Alan Heim, and I have one question, which is, how much did you rearrange things in Memento, or was it very tightly scripted? And I love the movie, by the way, as I love all your work. Bye.
What a sweet hat. Okay, so Memento. Memento is very tightly scripted. There's something really brilliant about the way that Chris wrote it. It was written in the order that you see it, except for a couple of minor eliminations of some of the jump backs. But what I like about the fact that he wrote it in the order it is that it still has a 3-act structure. So he didn't write it from beginning to end chronologically and then rearrange it like a chef, those Tepan chefs that do that, throw it up in the air. He wrote it in this way so that the arc is still intact as a 3-act structure. Mm-hmm. And we adhered to it. Of course, there are a lot of choices to be made about how long each of the repeated sections were and that sort of thing. But in the end, we adhered to the structure.
And the differences in the structure is what interests me, because you mentioned that there were a couple of places where in the script maybe it seems like a good idea to jump back and forth at a certain speed, 3 or 4 lines from one person or an interchange, and then you jump to a B story But as you cut those things together, you find what are the differences and what makes you decide we do have to deviate from the script.
I think that there was kind of a velocity to the jumping back and forth that it became disjointed, and we just decided to eliminate a couple of those and let the narrative play out longer. Because once you kind of get the pattern, it seemed like there wasn't a need to continue it as frequently as it was in the script.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It sure does.
Okay.
This is just going to be a night of surprises. So I know one of the many favorite people at SuperMeet here is Walter Murch. So I'd love to roll tape 10 and just hold it for a second. You just mentioned the fact that there's invisible editing and there's visible editing. There's a decision by the editor to remain in the background and serve the story. Well, everything serves the story, right? But what I want to do is hear Walter.
Okay.
So roll tape 10.
Okay.
Everyone, congratulations, Dody. I have 2 questions for you. One, a picture question, and the other one, a sound question. The picture question is invisibility. How invisible, what's the right balance between an editor being visible in the work that they do and being hidden in the shrubbery, so to speak? I was reading a book about a translator and from one language to the other, and he titled the chapter, "Is My Invisibility Showing?" In other words, can you be too invisible? Are there times when you have to push the envelope more than what's in the script? A classic example is the cut in Lawrence of Arabia from the match to the sun. In the original script, this was a dissolve. And Ann Coates famously said, why don't we make it a cut instead of a dissolve? And film history was different after that because of the boldness of that decision. So what's the right balance, in your opinion, outside of the script? I mean, the script can have big leaps in it, but you as an editor deciding, I'm going to push here and make things more aggressively, obviously editorial than otherwise would indicate.
I thought there were going to be 2 questions.
There will be.
Oh, okay then. Well, I am a fan of visible editing, and I think that again, it depends on the material and what the intention is. I love that cut, of course, from The Match to the Sun. It's fantastic. And I, as a as a rule, I don't like to use dissolves because I appreciate the boldness and the velocity, sort of the impetus of a cut versus a dissolve, which is kind of this gentle thing. So, but they have their place. They have their place, but it's not usually what I'm in for. It's funny, in Memento, there was, Chris said very distinctly to me, there will be no jump cuts in Memento. And there are quite a few scenes with quite a few jump cuts, and one most notably in the hotel room with the guy, Dodd, who comes in, and he's showering, and I have jump cuts of him in the shower, and then he hears the sound of the guy coming in, and then there's jump cuts when he's taping him up and shoving him into the closet, and all of that is sort of to create this kind of agitated energy of this surprise visit from Dodd on Leonard in the motel room. Mm-hmm. But it's a choice, and and I believe it's effective. The same thing in Matchstick Men, where there's lots of jump cuts to express Nick Cage's character's OCD phenomenon. And I think it's kind of interesting because As Good as It Gets, is it As Good as It Gets? Is that the one with Jack Nicholson? Where he also has OCD? The cutting in that is, and that's an editor I really admire and consider, he's just one of the greats, Richie Marx. But the cutting is much more smooth and much more even. And I thought it's interesting because it's two characters with OCD, but I chose to exaggerate that with the jump cuts.
Yeah. Let's hear the other question from Walter Murch. I think it's video 11.
Question 2 is sound, which is the time you spent as a sound editor adding sound and thinking about the film, watching the film, and watching the different cuts of the film as they would come across your desk, and then having to interact with the film, adding sound effects in the right place, but thinking about how the film was constructed and the different versions and how sound could help that. And then when you moved into picture editing, how did that experience help to inform your editorial choices? That's it. Farewell. Congratulations again. And make sure you tell everyone about the nerds. You'll know what I mean. Bye.
Yes, of course I know what he means about the nerds. I'm a nerd. Shall I do that part first?
Sure.
Yeah. Woo!
Yay, nerds.
Yeah, yay, nerds. There's a group of sound editors that meet once a year, and they're known as the nerds, and I'm one of them, as is Walter. And it's a really fun event for us, and I don't know what more to say about it. We get together.
Who wants to be there at the meeting of the nerds? Yeah, a couple of hands. Yeah, me too.
Yeah. We get together and drink and eat and talk a lot about sound and our lives, So.
But the question.
No, I'll do the answer. I'll answer the
perfect.
question.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So that was about the nerds. So, yes, I was a sound editor before I was a picture editor. I did mostly cut Foley and dialogue. And I really attribute the dialogue editing to learning my craft of film editing because, again, I was cutting the dialogue for some very, very exceptional editors. And in the good old days, we would take the audio and relay that down on a single stripe mag, and we would get the full take, and then I would recreate what the picture editor had done and see with longer handles for mixing purposes. But I could see where they had gone from one take to another, where they had compressed the time, where they had expanded the time. And I started to understand why they were doing what they were doing because I could hear the entire take, I could see the better performances, and I feel like I learned a tremendous amount from that experience.
Who are some of those editors that you saw?
Carol Littleton, Richie Marx, there's, Do I have to
Some
go
of
on?
the- some of the
John,
greats.
John Wright, Nick Bowman, some really great editors.
One of the
Stuart Pape, another great.
Cheryl mentioned that you were a mentor to her. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the people that, you know, your relationship with Carol Littleton, for example, and what was that? What did she give to you? And how did she mentor you? And what did you learn from her?
Well, I worked with Carol in a couple of different capacities. I was an assistant sound editor and a sound editor on a couple of films, but I also was her assistant on location for Silverado. And she was very generous to me and the other assistants in that when she would we would first prep all the dailies, roll in the racks. It was very
Back in the film days.
Back in the film days, industrial. And she would go at it, having seen those dailies the night before, she would come out a couple hours later and say, well, you gals want to come in and see the scene? And she would show us her first cut. She would ask us questions, what we saw, what we didn't like, and then talk about it from the point of view of the script, what was in the script, what was she trying to achieve. And I think that those were almost like master classes in editing. And she was very open about it.
And that's one of the great things about the coming up from an assistant editor to an editor. You kind of had a different path, but that's the value of that you were able to kind of have a teaching, mentoring relationship and see what's going on.
Yes, one thing very different now with nonlinear is that you can have multiple edits, so assistants can cut, and you can the mentoring can be different on a different level. If you wanted to, if an editor wanted to mentor someone in the film days, they would have to make a pretty big choice to let them cut a scene. Because if they didn't like it, they would have to unravel it, put it all back to dailies, and cut it again. Whereas with nonlinear, you can have multiple cuts. So that mentoring process, I think, has advanced.
One of the things that we talked about a little bit was the way that you have to change your style a little bit for different directors. And I have a question that I'd like to hear from Cheryl again. Question number 6. If you could play question number 6. For Dody.
I think you might be the only editor that I've worked with who likes to have their scene bins in text view, so as a list with a little description instead of a thumbnail. What is it about text view that appeals to you, and how does it help you cut a scene? And second part to the question, I heard that you recently switched to thumbnail view. What changed your mind?
So I like text view because somebody else likes text view. Yes. So I like it because the process of going through all of the film and arranging it the way that I like it helps me remember the material. And then my descriptions, I write them in such a way that I can sort those for my way of wanting to cut. So I might put the very first word in there would be wide, or if it's a single, the character's name, and then it's easy for me to sort and find the things. Text frame view doesn't work for me for so many reasons that have to do with the camera's moving, what is the emblematic frame, how can you really know that? So I just find it kind of frustrating. And in terms of switching recently to frame view, I do like to think of myself as very flexible. So I was working with another editor, Martin Bernfeld, on Power Rangers. He was a big frame view user and fan, and so I thought, yeah, I'll try it. So we had our bins set up both ways. We could switch back and forth quickly between frame view and text view, and I used it if it was, expedient.
Sure, and
whichever is faster is really what I believe in.
And you and I were talking about how different directors and their styles also make a difference, not just in how you deal with them on a social level necessarily, but even technical things like frame view. Like, for example, you were talking about David Ayers and how, because of the way he directs, frame view almost makes no sense.
Right. Yeah. On End of Watch, there were never two takes that were the same ever, and there was never two frames that were the same actually, because the cameras were attached to their bodies, or it was headgear, and they were moving around, and it just didn't mean anything. Frankly, I mean, in that film, by the way, I used my dialogue editing extensively, because I had to go in and to all the isolated tracks, find bits of dialogue, create the scene in dialogue, and so much of it was improvised, and then I would put images on top of it. So it was really cut, again, like kind of from the inside out. So I would just start by creating the scene in dialogue and add images.
And what I'm getting from that is that you can't just have a style like, this is the way I like to cut. It's got to go with the material, it's got to go with the story, it's got to go with the director.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. You mentioned Martin, and so I want to, the videos keep coming, folks. I want to roll.
It's fun for me.
I know, that's what I was hoping it would be fun for you. That was the whole goal. If you could please roll number 3 for me.
I hope this is Martin.
Hi Dody, it's Martin Bernfeld. We edited Power Rangers together. And I have a question for you. You've co-edited a few other movies before. What do you like about collaborating with other editors, and how do you feel it benefits the movie?
That's hilarious. Was he reading that question?
No.
I have a feeling. Do you have take 3? Take 4. I think he was more naturalistic. Yes.
I chose take 4, and I like take 4.
Okay. I love working with other editors, because I think that editors, they really penetrate material quickly, and they know how to articulate what they like or don't like. But the editor-director relationship, there's a certain amount of finesse and delicacy with which you must speak to a director. But 2 editors can just get right into it. And I like to say, my expression is, they can kick the shit out of the material a lot faster than an editor and a director. So there's just something about that is gratifying. That's my answer. So.
I like it. And I'm so flustered by the fact that I used the wrong take of Martin, and that we should have used take 3. I don't even know what to say. So one of the questions, the standard one, would be, what is your favorite part of the job of editing?
Well, actually, having said all that about finesse, talking to directors, I really love working with directors and being in the room with them and going over the material, no stone unturned, really crafting the film, and then spending that time with that director. It's my favorite thing.
Mm-hmm. And I've talked to many editors who have talked about that the editing room has to be a safe space for the director. Talk to me a little bit about making that a safe space and why. And
yeah, it's the least public part of filmmaking, to be in this dark room with the person. First of all, they're facing the material that they've shot, and there's always these periods of self-doubt and questioning. Did they get the best? Do they need more? Will people like it? So you have to kind of nurture the person and the material along, and not get into a funk over self-doubt. Because until the film is, say, born, like showing it to an audience, you don't really know. I mean, literally, really don't know. You can have a feeling or a strong feeling, but there's countless stories of people they were absolutely certain, and then they show it, and people don't like it, which is important that people like movies, So you have to, so yes, self-evident. So you have to have an understanding of trust between you and the director, that you're both working for the benefit of the film, and that your only interest is manifesting that person's vision.
And when you're doing that, one of the things that is of huge interest to me is the delicate balance between having ego yourself, to have enough confidence to know that you're benefiting the film, that your decisions are correct, but also to understand that you are the steward of the film for the director and the servant of that vision. So talk to me about that balance between having enough ego to do your job, but also to know that the director is the final say.
Right, yeah, well, you have to have opinions. There's no point in being there in the room unless you have opinions, and it doesn't mean that your opinions will always be embraced. But you have to bring something to the table, even if it's something that is rejected. Therefore, yes, you have to leave your ego at the door. And you can feel very strongly about something, and it's like kind of a parry thrust kind of situation with the director. And that can change even over the process, when the director can have that kind of pushing and when he can't. And as things get closer and closer to the end, probably there's less and less of that kind of pushing of your thoughts and ideas, if they happen to be different from the director's. I mean, the most fun, of course, is where you're kind of in sync and just really going in and making exactly what he or she wants, and just finding the best way to achieve it, instead of being like maybe at odds. But it does happen, and then sometimes those things come to fruition and sometimes they don't.
Okay. Could you please play video 7 for me?
Oh my God, who's it going to be? It's not.
Hi, my name's Christine. I work with Dody as the second assistant editor on the film Australia. Dody, I'd like to ask you, what qualities do you think a good editor has, be it cutting skills, technical skills, knowing the rushes and that sort of technique? And the other one being personality skills, such as storytelling and understanding script and maybe interacting with heads of department. Hope you are well. Much love. See you guys.
Sweet. Wow.
It's a skill question. So there's those technical skills, there's the artistic skills, and there's that ability, just like we were talking about, to relate to another person and be able to be in a room. You have to be in a room with somebody for 6 months or a year, and they have to enjoy the experience.
Right, yeah, that's true. So the technical skills, do we really have to talk about the technical skills?
No, not at all.
Well, I mean, obviously, I have to know how to operate my machines, and I've done so many different machines that I feel at this point, whatever machine came along, give me a couple of hours and I'll figure it out. The artistic skill is really, a lot of it is patience and what was like fortitude or endurance, because it seems to me that these days more and more material is being shot. So you really have to have the patience to go through it all and really get to know the material deeply, and then just keep crafting and trying different things. You can have a feeling that you know right away how you're going to put it together, but you have to do it another way, or 3 or 4 different ways. And then the director comes in and, of course, wants it 3 or 4 different ways as well. So you have to just be patient with that and willing to go through all of that and not get anxious about, it not just snapping together. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think patience is a huge skill set or characteristic of an editor. My wife sometimes listens to me and she goes, "How can you edit, like the same thing over and over and over again?" Mm-hmm. And there's also that idea that editing is like editing of a book, where the first draft is not, or of a script, right? The first draft is not usually, you mentioned Fury, that one was, mm-hmm. but so often it's revisiting a scene over and over and over again until it's perfect.
Yeah, there are lots of times where I'll cut and recut a scene 10 or 20 times before we lock down. And sometimes I go back to earlier versions. But still, you have to try the version and see that it's not what you want, to know, at least to have tried it. And sometimes the director will come in with some way that seems it's not readily apparent to me why he wants to do this. And I'll just sort of twist and turn the material into being what he's describing. And sometimes it's like, oh, magic, wow, I'm so happy that I pushed to achieve that. And other times just like, okay, that's just a failed experiment, let's go back. But you have to try it. You have to have faith, and you have to really be willing.
Yeah, I've heard from, it's kind of the old joke about, the notes from the studio or the notes from the director are so bad, but many times they're great notes, and
Absolutely.
you have to try everything, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
But in even the bad choices, I think sometimes I've talked to people that the bad notes can even generate good results, that trying to address something that maybe isn't quite the reason why something is bad at least tells you that somebody is having a problem with a scene for a reason.
Well, just like why I enjoy talking about editing, because so much of it is intuitive and it's done in a non-verbal form. It's done by cutting the material. You're sort of saying what you believe by choosing which parts of the dailies you're going to put together or juxtapose how and with what rhythm. When I'm doing this, I have to think and turn it into words to explain. And often, when I'm sitting with the director, he'll ask me, and he's like, why did you do that? And I go, I just, okay. And then I'll have to explain, I'll unravel it, and I'll go, there's always a reason, I just didn't think of it so precisely. And the same thing with the notes. When they bring up these notes, if, like you're saying, it's a bad note, suddenly I have to articulate why that's a bad note. And I think that is part of the process. If that,
Yeah.
in other words, either by trying it or by explaining why it's a bad note.
Sure. I've got another video that I'd like to show.
Is it my husband?
I hope. Is it your husband? Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Dorn. No. That's not correct. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I want to listen to number 8. This is kind of a technical, geeky thing, but she's part of the nerds. So can we play video 8?
Dody Dorn. How are you? Congratulations on NAB. I'm right over there. I'm going to be talking on the Logan panel, so it's pretty cool, huh? Actually, my question is, what time is it when you have to go to the dentist? Ha, you know that one. But truly, what I'm anxious to know is what tool you're using these days. You know me, I'm a Turo mouse guy. Kind of stick with that. But what are you doing? Is it, a Cintiq on a settee? A Wacom pad on a trapeze? I know you're always trying something new, so I'm curious as to what it is. Let me know.
By the way, who was that guy?
Mike McCusker. Yeah.
You co-edited Australia.
Australia, yes. Yeah.
So what do you? I'm not going to ask NLE-based questions, but we had a discussion about what you're cutting with.
Right. Yeah. He's right. I am always trying something new. It's part of my evil plan to always do something new on every film, and I never keep my settings. I make new settings for every film, and I try to change my habits. So on the last film, I used Cintiq and keyboard.
So for those does everybody know what a Cintiq is? Some. Could you please explain the Cintiq and how do you edit with a Cintiq?
Cintiq is like a Wacom with a monitor on it. So instead of just a pad using the pen as a mouse, driving the cursor, you are actually on the timeline and moving the cursor with the tip of the pen. And you can drag things to the source in the record monitor, and there are two different settings. One is where it is an actual mouse, and the other is where it's like actually under the pen point. And it just sort of, I actually use both of those depending on how far I want to reach.
So it's a monitor with one of the
pretty
windows
big.
of the NLE.
It's pretty big, and it's just like your center monitor. So there's the source, record, and the timeline.
And you're dragging stuff around.
Right.
That is so cool.
Yeah,
Always
I
learning
liked
something
it.
new, always trying something different.
Right, yeah. If there's something new to try, I want to do it.
I love it. Let's see, what else? I was trying to figure out if I have another great video, but I think we are, yeah, I will ask for video number 9.
Number 9.
Hi, I'm Sophie Dick, and I had the pleasure of working with Dody on the film in Australia. Dody, I have a question. How much does music inform your editing process?
Well, yeah, I don't know about informing it, but I do use music a lot. After the first assembly, and once I get a few scenes together in a row, I'll start putting in temp music. There's a tendency to put in, I think, a lot of temp music, and then as the film comes down, you have to kind of reevaluate. Maybe there's too much music. I think it's a really kind of a crutch when you don't have proper sound design. And I think once that starts coming together too, you may evaluate, oh, you don't really need music there. So I think it's a good crutch if you need to sort of knit things together where you don't have, like I said, the sound design, but
is it different with different directors? I know some directors, they don't want any temp music until almost when you're ready to go to a screening. Some directors are like, I don't even want to watch a scene without temp. And most editors, of course, don't cut the scene at all with music until it's ready to show to a director at least.
Right. Well, Chris Nolan doesn't use temp music.
At
So
all.
there's no temp music. Whatever he's using, it's either sketches, usually sketches from the composer, and then it evolves with the cut. Also on Fury, we had that situation with Stephen Price. It was fantastic. I did some temp music before Stephen started, but then once he started, he did sketches, and then the sketches evolved with the film all the way to the finish. That's fantastic. Then there are other situations where the composer doesn't work that way, or the director and the composer don't have that relationship. Then you have to temp it. And how you temp it is, it evolves. You keep trying things. You're still creating sort of a model or a blueprint for the composer if you're doing that.
Right.
And I think it starts pretty early. Mm-hmm. It starts pretty early. Before you have the whole film, I think I've been putting in temp music.
And we're almost out of time, but I did want to ask about one of those things that I've talked to a couple people about is once temp music is in, if you're trying to recut that scene, do you take the temp music out because then the temp music is providing a rhythm that you're fighting against?
Definitely. I often recommend not just that you take it out for recutting. I recommend to the director, we should watch the whole movie with no music before we go much further. Because again, these things, they evolve and they can somehow get rooted in, and it's not necessarily the right, rhythm for the scene. So I just take it all out, watch the whole film without it, and kind of reassess. But when recutting, I might not take it out. I might just recut the music, or take it out and then recut the music and put it back.
Totally makes sense. Well, I could personally stay up here for an hour listening to Dody, as I'm sure all of you could. Unfortunately, our time is up. Please, let's give a hand to Dody Dorn.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks.
so much.
Okay.
Great to talk to you.
Can I go this way?
I guess.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. I think the raffle is next.